70 years ago, almost to the hour, troops from the 9th Division of the 7th Corps of the 1st US Army, under the command of the exceptionally numerate General Omar Bradley, arrived at the town of Barneville, on the western coast of the Cotentin Peninsula in northern France. This was part of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Northern Europe, which had begun 12 days earlier on June 6, 1944, with Operation Neptune, better known today as the D-Day landings on the 5 beaches of Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. They are written there, just in the badly chosen colour. The landings were made possible by the so-called Mulberry Harbours, artificial structures towed across from England, which allowed for the creation of safe spaces for supply ships to dock. This was the largest amphibious assault in the history of human conflict. If you lined up all the ships that participated in the D-Day fleet, end to end, from across the widest point of the Channel, you'd be able to walk from England to France, which is awesome, but sort of misses the point of an invasion, rather spectacular. It very nearly didn't happen, for all sorts of reasons: bad weather predictions, disagreements among Allied commanders. But I'm not going to talk about crosswords exchanged via telegraph as so much as crosswords in the Telegraph, and more specifically, the crossword that nearly cancelled D-Day. Well, I'm overrating it a bit. This is a little bit too melodramatic. There wasn't one crossword. One crossword couldn't on its own stop 7,000 ships from leaving. There were 5 of them. Now, there's probably nothing geekier than military history except for perhaps crosswords, and nothing geekier than crosswords except for perhaps cryptic crosswords. For those of you fortunate enough not to have encountered them before, cryptic crosswords are like regular crosswords operating on replacement bus service. They take you where you want to go, but they're slower, more painful, and drag you via all sorts of hellholes you had no intention of visiting. These 15 by 15 grids are an exercise in refined sadism, and I should know I've set a few and solved even fewer. Dante was wrong when he said that hell had 9 circles. There's 225 squares. The 5 crosswords in question were all set by this man, Leonard Sidney Dawe, who was a former England football player, which counts in his favour, and a physics teacher at the Strand School in London, which probably counts against him. He also set the very first crossword that the Telegraph ever printed about 20 years before this. So he was largely responsible for popularising the crossword in this country. By the early 1940s, some of his puzzles were the ones used as recruitment tools to get cryptanalysts involved in Bletchley Park. So we can imagine that in the summer of 1944, a military intelligence official who likes the crossword because it allows him to see the world in black and white and fits his worldview neatly, is on the bus in his daily commute into work doing his favourite crossword in the Daily Telegraph, when on May 2nd, 1944, he sees the word Utah, which is one of the D-Day beaches. He probably dismisses this as a coincidence, maybe thinks he's got the wrong word in for 17 across. Next day, the answer is Utah. And on May 22nd, 3 weeks later, the word Omaha appears, which is another one of the D-Day beaches. And by this point, he's probably dismissing this as a coincidence of some sort that he will tell his family once this is all declassified. But then the word Overlord appears on May 27th, 1944. And suddenly the smile has faded from his face. Is he going to disturb his superiors over something as trivial as crosswords in the Daily Telegraph when he probably should be working? He decides not to. Nothing happens. Then on May 30th, 1944, this bush is a centre of nursery revolutions round and round the Mulberry Bush. And on June 1st, Britannia and he hold to the same thing. Britannia rules the waves and so does the Roman god of the sea, Neptune. And now this is getting serious. 5 puzzles, 5 D-Day code words, 5 days to go until D-Day. The only way this could be any more suspicious is the crossword. Hey there, Adolf, looking awesome, tons of love, XX. Something has to be done. The idea that codes were being transmitted to the Germans via crossword sounds outlandish. Consider 2 years earlier, one of Dawe's puzzles had included the word Dieppe, and the very next day, an Allied assault on the French port of that name had resulted in significant loss of life. This time, there was no point in taking unnecessary risks. A car was sent to Effingham in Surrey, where the Strand School had been evacuated. Dawe was taken in for questioning. So was his brother-in-law, who was a senior official of the Admiralty, and Dawe's co-compiler based in Bury St Edmunds. They arrested Dawe and interrogated him for hours, another indication of the government's well-known propensity for locking up doors once the horses bolted. Thank you very much. I was hoping someone would laugh at that. Eventually he was released, as he said in 1958 BBC interview with typical understatement. In the end, they decided not to shoot us. 5 days later, June 6, 1944, 156,000 men go across, 4,414 go down, and there aren't enough little white squares in a month's worth of crosswords to do justice to little white squares that live in the cemeteries of northern France. Now, when this affair finally made it to the press in the 1950s, it was dismissed as a coincidence. For the public today, even one, especially one of the Geek Showoff event, is more statistically literate than the public would have been 70 years ago, so 50 years ago. And the odds of something like this happening at random, even with the most forgiving odds, is roughly the order of 1 in 10 to the power of 30. Which is like winning the lottery 4 times. In 1984, to mark the 40th anniversary of D-Day landings, a man called Ronald French came forward and shed some light on this matter. French had been one of Dawes' students at the Surrey village of Effingham, where the Strand School had been evacuated to, and he revealed that as an occasional treat, Dawe would let the schoolboys fill in words into the grid, which he would then clue for future inclusion in the Telegraph. Now, Effingham, as scintillatingly exciting as it no doubt is today, in 1944 would have been, well, pretty effing boring. The sort of place that a replacement bus service drags you through. Certainly for boys recently evacuated from London. With plenty of free time on their hands and far away from their family, they were probably irresistibly attracted to the villages of Great Bookham, 2 miles to the east, and East Horsley, 2 miles to the west, where the Canadian regiments were stationed prior to their participation in the D-Day landings. Loose lips may sink ships, but they make for fascinating crosswords. And if anyone would like to try any of them, I've brought a couple with me here tonight if anyone wants to while away the spare time. Thank you very much.